Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. Welcome to the last day of the project technical gathering and the project team gathering for the OpenStack Manila team. Today we have a fun schedule, although quite a loose schedule. So we're going to be talking some really interesting and important topics, more like an update presentation on what's been going on, because many of these efforts are multi-cycle. And just drop in the link to the Etherpad in the chat. But you have it in the meeting notes as well, if you're using the PTG bot. All right, so we'll get started with the first topic here. It's going to be about VirtIOFS. What are the plans? What's an update from the Wallaby cycle and such? So Tom and Lee are here. So Tom, would you like to present your screen, or what do you want me to? You can take over.
If you don't mind doing it, Gautam, there are no
Okay.
slides or anything, so
all right,
it's just a matter of perhaps scrolling at some point if we need to go further down.
Yep. Just give me a second, but you can get started though.
Sure. So the main Etherpad has a link to another little Etherpad on VirtIOFS. So if you go there, to follow along, we discussed VirtIOFS in the last PTG, both within Manila itself and with the Nova team. So I'll go relatively quickly, but people should feel free to interrupt and ask questions on anything if something's mysterious. But the idea here is that Nova will allow users, OpenStack users, to basically attach Manila file systems to their compute instances, to their guest VMs, just the way they can attach sender volumes today. And VirtIOFS is the new technology from Kimu and libvirt for exposing file systems from a hypervisor to a guest VM that we want to leverage to enable this. And I'm not going to go through this demo. I had it here. It's 2 minutes long. You can look at it yourself. That gives the basic idea of how this will work. What it will get us, why we want to do it, really comes down to 3 main areas: security, usability, and scale and performance. So on the security front, it protects cloud storage infrastructure from untrusted tenants, because VM guests no longer need any network access to storage. So today, when a Nova compute instance user on there wants to use a share, they mount the share, and what that means is that their compute instance actually has a network path to the storage backend. And this is no longer required because it'll be like Sender in that they will not have a network path. They will get their storage through the hypervisor. This is especially important with storage systems like Ceph because they have very smart, intelligent clients where the server delegates work to them, like quota enforcement. So they really need trusted clients. So you wouldn't have a Ceph client on the VM. It wouldn't require it. When you did native CephFS, the compute node, which is under control of the cloud administrator, would be doing this native CephFS mount. And the user VM is just doing a VirtIOFS mount. There's really no need for DHSS true mode where a driver manages virtual file servers and sets up special share networks. It's not like that would go away or anything. I'm just saying you can get similar effects with the DHSS equal false driver if you have VirtIOFS. It has usability advantages in that there's consistent user experience and expectations across OpenStack, block, and file storage, which is, we already said, it kind of works more like Sender. There's also an abstraction layer for guests. They do a mount -t VirtIOFS with a tag, and they don't have to know anything about the backend storage protocols, NFS, CIFS, CephFS, Lustre, whatever. And kind of a corollary to that, they don't need any special keys or credentials, and access control is simplified. You don't need to correspondingly, basically. There's scale and performance advantages in that, first of all, and you don't need things like a central Ganesha gateway to make CephFS safe for multi-tenancy. So anything that required funneling through a central service on compute nodes under pacemaker control can be eliminated. And you basically, there's something like a gateway in the sense that there's a VirtIOFS process running on compute nodes, but these scale out over the entirety of your cloud. And you can, there's some opportunities there most likely for consolidation of the actual remote mounts, as we can see when we talk about how to do it. So basically, Nova would have a share attach API in the how section, just like they have a block attach API now. So a user would say, please attach this share to my VM. Nova, then I wrote here, and Lee has some good thoughts. So let's come back to that after I run through it quickly. Basically, it needs to get the information about how to do a staged mount on the compute node from Manila. And I was thinking we'd do something like the OS brick library, call it OS share or ideas. And Lee, if it's okay, let's come back to your discussion point in a moment. Then with that information, Nova would mount the remote share on the compute node itself. This is all under administrative control, cloud administrator control. Then with the staged mount, Nova could then expose the share via VirtIOFS to any guest that needs to mount it and has access to mount it. So there was the scaling point. There's an opportunity to consolidate and reduce the number of actual remote mounts here. There's a VirtIOFS host process, VirtIOFSD. We think libvirt ought to be able to spawn that and run it. In the POC above, I had to do that myself. So we might have to do that initially. And then use libvirt to hot plug the stage share in. So basically what the demo shows is how to do this at boot time. And it's basically a matter of editing the XML for libvirt XML for a domain for a guest, so that it has a memory device, and there's some massaging of, you can see it in the demo what you need to do. But basically right now today, that is not supported with the live VM for hot plug at the libvirt level, but it is supported at the underlying QEMU and KVM level. So that needs to get filled in. I'm jumping into the next section, but for the workflow here, once that's there, the guest still needs to do a mount with the mount command, like I mentioned earlier. But so you can think of it, the stage mount on the compute node as being analogous to a sender block attach. And then the mounts, like what we do today with Manila, but simplified. We discussed this at the Wallaby PTG. I put links in there. The Nova folks gave us a favorable reception. In fact, Nova developers and also people like the high performance computing community who were in Nova section were very excited about it. But they pointed out that the demo, which you see above, is of a share that comes up at the same time that you boot. It's not a boot from share, but it's a boot with a share. And they said, well, look, that code path in Nova is fraught with history, if I can phrase it that way, and it's not your core use case. Why don't you focus on the live attach use case, which is really the core use case for Manila anyway? And we said, sure. So I very excitedly went back from the Wallaby PTG saying, okay, we're going to go ahead now. First thing I need to do is redo my POC demo above with live attach, and then discovered that it doesn't work. I can use the command to attach a device, and it works as long as the VM is shut down, which is like the boot with share instead. So I opened a BZ for this and have spent this last release doing a lot of lobbying for getting it some attention. And I'm optimistic at this point that it is getting attention. The developers say that doing the libvirt work shouldn't be a lot of work. They told me that earlier on, and I kept saying, okay, well, I hadn't done yet politely. But we also have some product managers pushing for it now within Red Hat, and most of the VirtIOFS developers on the stuff work at Red Hat. And it turns out that for their own live migration work, they want to start by unplugging any file systems, migrating and replugging them in before so they need it too. So I'm guardedly optimistic, constructively optimistic is the phrase I use, that this blocker will be out of the way and that we can move on to doing some early prototyping on this with Nova itself rather than just a manual demo. Lee Yarwood, who's here, is going to lead that effort. And he is the man for cinder block attach, detach. So we're hoping to learn from the years of pain and blood that he's given on that front and avoid a lot of the problems that have hit there. Lee, why don't you say something to everybody, including asking your question about the best way to get the information Nova needs from Manila.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Tom. That was really good. Thank you for the overview. Yeah, my question on line 31. So the way that OSBrick works at the moment between Nova and Cinder, it doesn't actually handle the communication between Nova and Cinder. So Nova reaches out to Cinder independently of OSBrick to collect information regarding, how to attach a particular volume. Nova then supplies the information that's returned from Cinder to OSBrick, and OSBrick then uses that information to connect the underlying block device on the compute host. What I think you're kind of alluding to here might be slightly different to that, in that this OS share library kind of does both parts. It both handles the communication between Nova and Manila, and then the underlying kind of plugging or mounting on the computer host itself. Is that the actual relationship you were going for?
Not intentionally, actually. I just hadn't reviewed what was happening with OSBrick. I think we would do, others on Manila correct me, but I think we'd be happy to do whatever makes sense from Nova's perspective on this. And you're
Yeah,
suggesting,
okay.
is there an API already for that first step? Like looking at the Manila exports. Gotham had an idea that we would keep information and share metadata as well. Another one thing I think we need to make sure that the same VirtIOFS tag is used for the mount, no matter what compute node a guest gets scheduled on, right? So if it's if a guest goes down and comes back on another compute node, or eventually is live migrated to another compute node or something like that, the user ought to be able to see the same information for doing a mount. And I think Gotham had suggested that we might want to keep that in share metadata. And then
although
in some ways, there's no need for the export location. There is for the compute node, though. Yes.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Really, the underlying compute node here is, the user in the traditional Manila kind of use case. So we need to be able to kind of grant access to a compute node, figure out what the export details are, potentially pull credentials as well. I'm not sure how the Manila model kind of works, just as a plain user in an instance, and how you kind of get a user
and you may need credentials for sure.
Yeah. So just like modeling out those APIs, but it seems, so the reason I put down that this probably should be documented somewhere, it probably is already, but it just smells like the kind of traditional user case, but pure API calls instead of using the CLI that I assume is kind of used today, so they can mount things.
Yes, and anything you see in CLI has underlying API calls.
But yeah, in terms of the actual layout of things, like I'm happy to kind of keep the current template that we have with Cinder, where Nova will make these calls to Manila independent of any library, and then using the information that we get back from Manila, feed that down into some library to do the underlying mounting of a share. Like we could potentially reuse OSBrick for that part, because it does have, actually no, it doesn't have, sorry, ignore that. The Livert driver with Nova does host mounting of remote file systems, I think. But really that should be in a separate library. So
yeah, I think from a release coordination aspect, if nothing else, it should be separate.
Yeah, and I think you guys are looking to support Lustre, did I see, and some more exotic file systems like that. So yeah, having that outside of the Nova code base would probably be a good thing, because we wouldn't have to directly support it, just the interface between us and the library. Yeah, and with the tagging, so you want to have human readable, just normal string kind of tag names, and not the UUID of the share or anything, because the UUID of the share shouldn't change, right? But is the user interface that you want here? So when you're within the instance, instead of just having a long UUID of the share, you want some kind of like name or something to be the mount point.
It's a good question. I'm a little stale on this, honestly. I think we had thought of using the UUID as a tag at one point. I don't remember how that came out, but I think I thought it was a good idea, and that it might be something where you could. We talked about, well, could we just get the tag by a rule rather than having to communicate it, between services, that would be a rule. So it might work.
It makes sense. I think the part of the thing was also the limitation on the size of the tags, or what, did we want to make it convenient to people to say, hey, mount the website share, rather than saying, you know, here's the UUID or the share name. So we have two things. We have share underscore UUID for this sort of purpose that gets set as the share name. And we also have the share ID, which is a plain UUID, just like any other service and resource.
So we can check the size and make it either one of these unique IDs or some kind of function of it. That,
yeah, that should be fine. Nova can supply anything really, obviously to libvirt, and then that's obviously through VirtIOFS, or is that the daemon? I forget. Sorry. Yeah, it'll go through then into the instance. So that should be fine. Yeah, and the docs that you've listed there with the CLI and everything, that's excellent. Thank you. Are there no username and password kind of credentials potentially that are generated when creating an export for a share or anything? I thought I saw, maybe it was in your demo, Tom, sorry.
So when you create a share, unlike Cinder, there is no attach in time. When you create a share, it is exported. And it's not available to anyone to mount without the allow access stuff. That part is just in time. So if you want to provide access to a client, that happens, and then you can use that mount point. So the mount points are available as soon as you create the share. But I mean the export path, I mean. But then you got to go do the client access allow part. So we can abstract that out, I think, in one call from Nova. You're thinking this is the sort of thing that OS share library takes care of, right?
Well, I'm happy just to have the independent calls from Nova, like through a Manila client or whatever. I was just trying to get the order correct in my head, but
so when for the stage mount, the compute node may require user credentials or search or something like that. And that will depend on the protocol in question. So in the demo I think I used above. I've had several of them, but I think the one above uses CephFS. So it was a user password because that's the way my Samba server at home was set up. So that's why you saw a password there. But so that's a good question, because similarly, if you were doing a native CephFS mount, you would have a CephX ID. And you here is Nova doing the stage mount, not the end user in the end. I'm not saying that I know you're clear on that, Lee. I'm just saying that to reemphasize the point too, that for the end user of OpenStack, things are simpler. But we would, that's the type of information that is conveyed today for OS Brick with block storage. So
yeah, the block storage side of it. So we feed when we first initially talked to Cinder about mapping a volume to us, we provide a host connector that kind of sets out what the host actually looks like. So, you know, IQN and fiber channel stuff, etc. Anything that's relevant there. We feed that to Cinder, and it then on the back end maps the volume to us, and then provides us a crazy dict of information, connection info that includes these credentials normally. Now, from what you're saying there, it sounds like specific backends are going to need, you know, specific things when we make the call to allow access to the share.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be the confusing part for us to work through, and there is like a matrix of stuff. You could interchange the kind of access as well, depending on what you're trying to do. Like for example, for NFS, if you're using Kerberos, you'd be ending up using usernames rather than you know, IP addresses. But for the simplest case, you're probably using compute node IP address as the client access. And if you're doing
and for CephFS, depending on the
doing
back end, it might use user or
your IP address.
You know, so they're independent, but yeah, it's a matrix. But for our POC, we can start pretty simple with these.
Oh yeah. Sorry, I'm probably going too much into the weeds.
But eventually,
Yeah,
we will need to carry both the protocol, so you know the syntax for your mount command and basically the argument mount -d, and also any credentials for the type of access that has been allowed. So it might be CephFS and user, might be CephFS and IP. It might be NFS and user in some fancy NFS cases, but typically will be NFS and IP. Native CephFX and a CephX key, etc.
Yeah, and that's fine. Like there's a lot of detail in just the share show API looks like to give us the high level kind of protocol that's used at least. And on the Nova side with Cinder, we already have, well, in the libvirt driver at least, we already have a load of subclassed out specific volume types that we then kind of delegate to depending on what has to happen ahead of calling OSBrick. So the interface to OSBrick is simple, but for things like Ceph, we have to kind of set up secrets in libvirt ahead of time before calling that particular API and stuff. So yeah, we could just do that same kind of pattern here as well, and we probably get somewhere near where we need to be. And we could also handle like actually doing the authentication then through that layer. Yeah, the only thing is it's down on the compute at that point, but that's more implementation stuff. But yeah, for the initial POC, probably just sticking with NFS and just using the IP to begin with. It is the saner thing to do, and we can go from there.
Yeah, so we're talking, we keep saying initial POC, and I think Lee and I at least are thinking, we're hoping we get lucky and that the libvirt live attach is ready for us soon. It's really the blocker. As soon as it's ready, we can start playing around with this. First of all, I can do it outside Nova and just prove, make sure that that it works. And we can look at the XML that Nova would need to generate, and then put something together that from Nova that wire it up. And then that's where Lee is really the person who's going to make all this happen for us. We're willing to help and do any work you need, Lee, but you're the brains.
No pressure.
And then it'll be a multi-release thing, and we anticipate that we may have new requirements on libvirt from doing the POC. But if we have something to show that how it could work in OpenStack, we'll have more weight in helping schedule their work. As it comes down to. So that's kind of, we didn't want to take a whole lot of time today, and a lot of this can get designed more in the course of an initial spec or spec in progress, or whatever you want to call it. Some kind of design document that we work on jointly.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be a Nova spec, obviously for the Nova APIs that we're going to be introducing, but yeah, if and when stuff crops up on the Manila side, I'm happy to draft. Do you guys have a specs repo?
Yeah, we do.
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, so I can draft a spec or something then, or even just a high level thing as well. But yeah, as Tom said, just POCing this out a little bit to begin with is where we'll start. I will take a look at the boot with attached share use case again. I know that people kind of didn't want us to go down that route last time around at the Wallaby PTG, but we can definitely make a dumbed down version of that as well. Potentially, if the live attach stuff isn't around anytime soon, just to kind of prove out some of the Manila APIs.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, because like otherwise we're going to have to wait for the actual underlying libvirt stuff to arrive. That seems a bit silly. So I can try and prove it out that way. But yeah, anyway, don't want to take up any more time.
Awesome, thank you. I had one other question that just came up though. Like, I'm sure you've had to deal with the whole live attach expansion in Cinder and such. Did you experiment any with extending, shrinking these file systems, Tom or Lee?
I have not.
Okay.
Yeah, I've not as well, but with file systems, I think it might be a little bit cleaner than with the block devices. Don't quote me on that, but yeah, we can definitely check it out during the POC potentially.
Because the reason I ask is because we have no way of fencing stuff in Manila, unlike Cinder. Like I think in Cinder, unless you use a particular micro version and some other flags, the API is just going to tell you, no, you can't extend an attached share. So for instance, for us in Manila, there is no concept of an attached share because there are multiple consumers at any given point of time, and we can't really tell who's consuming the share.
In some ways, at least with some backends, it shouldn't be a problem, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm assuming.
I mean, with CephFS, for example, all I'm doing is changing a quota and bumping it up.
Yep.
And with many thin provision backends or something, there's no actual reallocation. The problem would be with backends who are basically using a block device on which they effectively have to do the equivalent of a sender extend and a file system resize before they can offer services. And we have some reference driver type backends like that, but I'm not sure if any of the they're more conceptual toy type. Toy is the wrong word because they have a very useful purpose, but the big production systems may have no problem with this.
Yeah, on the compute side, the only concern would be if we had to, for whatever reason, supply libvirt with a command to resize the file system within the instance that we have to do with block devices. There's a specific libvirt and then QEMU command that goes down and resizes the block device. But I can't think with VirtIOFS, so doing everything through Fuse, I don't think that's required. But yeah, that would be my only concern, because on the Cinder side, when you extend the volume, there's coordination then between Cinder and Nova that has to happen. And if Manila in this case isn't tracking attachments, it won't know who to talk to, unless Nova then provides a very generic API that Manila can call with a shared UID, and then Nova figures out, okay, all of these instances are affected, go and tell them. But yeah, hopefully we don't need that, but that's my only concern.
The other thing I'll log is that not just for the POC, but even for the first release of this, it's perfectly acceptable from Nova's point of view, maybe even preferable, that we say live migration is not supported yet for any VMs that have VirtIOFS mounts. So that's nice in the sense that there's probably a cluster of, first of all, it's not ready yet in VirtIOFS, but even when it is, there may be a set of interesting issues that we need to work through on that before it can be supported. And we don't have to do that before going to market, as it were.
Yeah, and that's all easy to do on the Nova side to limit that. And yeah, the issues will be very similar to the volume kind of issues that we've had. And to be honest, it's not about the happy case in that scenario. It's more about the unhappy case and rollback and ensuring that you don't end up with shares mounted on the wrong compute hosts or not mounted at all and things like that when we have to roll back a live migration. It can just get a little bit tricky, but yeah, it should be fine.
Yeah, live migration scares the bejesus out of me right now. So I'm glad that we can deal with it as a separate issue.
Awesome. Well, any other questions, concerns? All right. Cool. Thank you so much, Lee and Tom. This is a pretty cool discussion. Thanks for the update on what was happening in the last cycle and such. This is good to catch up on, and excited to see what's coming and be of help.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me. Tom, just a heads up that there is a section on the Nova PTG pad about talking about this, but I think we're going to probably end up bike shedding about Nova APIs, so don't feel like you have to be there for it. If there is anything that comes up, I can always talk to you later about it, but yeah, it's mostly going to be talking about volume APIs and the mistakes we made and not repeating them, I think. So, but anyway, thanks for having me, everyone. I'm going to drop now and head back to the Nova
Thank you,
PTG.
Lee.
Cheers. Bye now.
Care. Cheers. Bye-bye. All right, let's switch to the next topic. We're running about 20 minutes late, but we've accounted for that. There's good buffer time today. I was supposed to help me plan happy hour a little bit, but it's all right. It's all happy hour as long as we're here. So let's switch to CephFS driver updates with Victoria. And Victoria, do we have everyone in the room that you needed for that?
Hey, Gotham. Thanks. Yes, we do. We have Romana. Hi, Romana, and Julio and Francesco as well. They are on the Ceph community and also obviously on the OpenStack community. And well, it's nice to have you guys here on the call so we can share with the rest of the community the plans, the future plans at least. I can start with the update. There is an etapad that is linked there that we can use to follow the discussion. That one, exactly. Thanks, Gotham. All right, we can start with the changes that we added to Wallaby for both CephFS drivers. So we went through a huge refactoring process during this cycle, and it's pretty exciting because we changed the way we were communicating with the backend. We were using a library that is called the Ceph Volume Client, and now we are using the Ceph Manager interface, which is an interface that is intended to be the single source of truth to communicating with Ceph. So we are now leveraging this interface, and well, we gain some extra benefits from this switch. One of those benefits is that the Ceph backend can work with multiple file system clusters. There is a new option that you can use to indicate which file system you want to use, and if you have many of them, and if not, we are going to be using a default one. Also, the deletion of shares operation that we now have on the Ceph drivers, both CephFS and NFS, is way faster. Basically, well, the explanation is that the Ceph Manager moves delete shares content to a trash folder, and the contents are purged asynchronously rather than handling this as part of the synchronous delete operation. So that's a huge benefit we now have with this implementation. And the other feature that we added on Wallaby is the creation from a snapshot. Both CephFS native and CephFS NFS drivers had the capability of creating snapshots already from shares, but you couldn't create a share from the snapshot itself. Now with by leveraging the Ceph Manager interface, this is a feature that was available in Nautilus, and now we are using. You can use through the Manila drivers. Also, there were several enhancements on the CI. We use a plugin that is called the desktop plugin Ceph for testing both CephFS native and CephFS NFS drivers. This project has, well, it definitely requires some love because it was quite updated. I think I mentioned this last PTG that we were working on bumping the version of Ceph that we were testing. Nowadays, we are testing with Octopus. Last Ceph release is Pacific, so it's one release behind, but that is very good in comparison with what we were doing before those updates come in. Also, there is a non-voting job that is testing master, which is awesome because it allows us to follow up with the OpenStack master and Ceph master at the same time. Of course, it might be not very stable because we are using two masters. Benefits of this is that it allows us to catch any incompatibility with a lot of time and allow us to submit fixes for any of the services that are consuming Ceph, being it Nova, Cinder, Swift, or, well, of course, Manila. Any comment or question on this? I don't know, Ramana, maybe Tom, do you want to add something to the updates?
I think you've covered everything, Victoria.
Great, thanks. All right, so
I did have a question though. So we're working
yes.
through certain things like, so we've, for somebody upgrading from a previous version of Manila to the latest, that's Wallaby, they ought to make some changes to their I mean, we have a couple of upgrade issues, right? The fact that the Ceph cluster that they're running ought to be in a particular version. So I think we've not called that out yet in documentation. I mean, I mean to specifically talk about the minimum, you know, the versions that we got all those fixes into Ceph itself. And I'm only concerned because I'm sure because we don't communicate it. I mean, or rather Ceph doesn't communicate it the same way in terms of the release notes and stuff. I don't know how users can get that information. So maybe we should probably put it up in our CephFS doc saying, you know, these are the minimum versions that we support. I know we've already called out that we're only going to support Octopus and beyond, but I'm talking about the specific, you know, release of Octopus that all this will work with. So if somebody tries it with an older version of Octopus and they've not upgraded their Ceph to latest, the driver will break. And
That's
same thing with
yeah.
The same thing with the CephFS user that we configure with the driver. I was under the impression that we were reducing the capabilities, but we're actually requiring different capabilities. So that's the so technically, if somebody upgrades, their driver will be broken if they don't have these extra capabilities. So and I think you're doing that already. You're adding that in the documentation right now. So that's really helpful. Maybe, I mean, I don't know, we'd probably just reach out to the OpenStack discuss list as well and let them know that this is an upgrade impact that they ought to pay attention to. I mean, the biggest thing is, of course, once you upgrade and you think everything is all right, you probably already run a bunch of health checks and figure this out. But we'll try to make that information easy to be consumed.
That's correct. Just to expand a bit on this concern of updates. These well, refactor landed in Wallaby, and we have been testing this with, well, the changes that we needed on the Ceph side were included in the Pacific release, and they were backported to Octopus and to Nautilus. But as Gautam mentioned, there are a specific micro version in both Octopus and Nautilus that include those patches that we need on the Manila side. So yes, we are working on documentation to add to our own documentation for these drivers to indicate which micro version do we need for any of those Ceph versions. And also, if another question that you might have is what happens if I have an old Manila deployment with Ceph and I want to upgrade to Manila Wallaby with a new Ceph version. That has been tested, that path has been tested, and the old shares that you have on your deployments are working. We are going to work on the new implementation. Something that maybe as well is worth mentioning on the documentation we're working on.
Yeah, and if somebody's paying attention, and I don't think that level of detail is something that matters, because we've abstracted that part away, and Ceph has abstracted that part away, right? Like the distinguishing things between previous export from Ceph and a new export from CephFS for this new Ceph manager interface. So that's pretty cool. I mean, that the fact that we've tested it, and we'd probably do some more testing and find out any issues that are there. That's so thanks for doing that. I was just thinking about something that I really forgot. So sorry about that.
No worries.
Yeah, please go ahead. I guess we'll fix in the documentation gaps. My concern is for those that are the distributors, for instance, like all the deployment tooling, the distributions, Red Hat, SUSE, whoever else is consuming this code, and how they have to change their deployment tooling or distributions to catch up for this. And that's an active piece of conversation that's happening. And if you're on the Manila channel, you'll notice that folks are already hitting these upgrade issues and working through them. But if you're not using a distribution and like you're relying on upstream bits and such, and probably reading release notes and the documentation and catching up. Like I know CERN does this a lot, and they go bleeding edge all the time. So I would not be surprised if they attempt a Wallaby update in like the next month. And so we should probably try to put up the documentation soon enough for those sort of people, for those sort of deployments.
So where do you think the gaps are? Documentation and the deployment tool. I think Victoria posted a patch in, I don't know which one was it, the deployment tool that we use.
OpenStack yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you think those are sufficient? Or?
No, that's probably a good start. I mean, there are too many deployment tools for us to go fix along the way, right? So that one was done because we looked at some failures in the OOO land, and it was very similar, and we could just find the code in the OpenStack repositories. But you could be using a deployment tool that's doing all of this configuration outside that we don't have visibility to. Like I know the K cloud with the I don't know whether it's the square kilometer array or one of the things. They have a non-public or rather a non-OpenStack repository sitting on GitHub that has some configuration stuff for the Manila user based off on our documentation. And so that came up in a bug report. So people are obviously going to have their own tooling beyond these things that we know about. So if we call it out in documentation, I think that's the best we can do. And in upgrade notes, if we have to go back and add any more upgrade notes to Wallaby, that's fine.
Or do you want to make a code change in the driver where we check the minimum capabilities of the use by client at Manila, or whatever we use for the Rados client? We can do that as well. Would that be helpful?
So how would that work? Like in the sense, would we stop the driver from loading, or would you just want to put a
during startup? It would. I mean, we could check what the capabilities are that the user is supplied and say if it's good enough or not. I mean, I don't know if it's useful, but maybe you can
might
give
be
a
useful if some. I mean, documentation is one thing, and we know how sparingly it is used. So you're right. Actually, that's a great idea. If we can figure out a way to go put a warning in the log files saying I'm not configured right, and this is the capabilities that I require. And even that that warning could be as, I mean, because there's some parts of this that I love, the fact that we required a client user that could do way too many things, but now we don't. So even that part could easily be called out, saying, you know, we no longer, we have these capabilities, but we no longer require these capabilities. These are the standard capabilities that we need. But I would be a little, this thing about, you know, preventing the driver from starting up, because that might break somebody's upgrade tooling.
Yeah, that shouldn't be so hard to add. Like in one of the previous patch sets, I submitted a check like that by checking the version of the driver that we were loading. So it's just a decorator for some specific functionality, and that's it. But I don't know how, like, it's like, it should be okay if we want to add that, in order to make sure we prevent any, I don't know, user that may not be aware of these limitations to not fall in having a broken deployment.
I don't think stopping the driver process was intended, just maybe not declaring it initialized.
Yeah,
but we
that's
need to
true.
we need to log in any case. You log a warning or an error.
Yeah,
we can talk about the detail, but what action should happen besides logging, if any. But it might make sense to say it's not successfully initialized, because you can't really use it safely.
Exactly. So yeah, log a warning if you have way too many permissions, but if you don't have the permissions you need to do a proper operation, just stop initialization, keep the shared manager service running, so the upgrade health checks pass. Because I know there are, I mean, the way deployers write this stuff is, if something breaks, they actually stop the upgrade. So this isn't that sort of a breakage with the service itself. It's maybe a configuration change that can be done, you know, even after the services come up. But yes, of course, there's going to be some loss of time in terms of being operational, right?
Yeah. The other point that you brought up, Gautam, where you know, there are certain features in Ceph that are stable only for a particular release. For example, the multiple file systems in a cluster that was declared stable in Pacific. So if a user sets the, decides to use the CephFS file system option, where he or she can choose a particular Ceph file system to use, and he uses that with Octopus, that might be an issue, right? So
would it be an issue for the operations that Manila does? Like, is that something where we have to again warn users via our documentation sorts, or via log messages?
Yeah, I think when you set up multiple file systems and with Octopus, there is a warning where the Ceph administrator has to, there's a confirmation flag that he has to give. Right. So I guess that's okay.
So they really know that it's an experimental feature that they're enabling.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, but this versioning that you said, we might have to pay more attention to how we communicate that. Yeah, sounds good.
Just added a few notes and could definitely iterate this offline to see how we can implement. All right. Any other comment or question regarding the updates on Wallaby? All right.
Just saying, great job. It was a lot of work. Definitely want to acknowledge that in the community. There was a lot of coordination between multiple communities. We've said that before here in the retrospective. I just want to repeat it again. Great job. Thanks, all three of you and Victoria, for driving this effort.
Thanks, Gautam. All right, so now maybe it's the fun part of talking about the future work we have in mind, because we have several changes that we are planning for the upcoming releases. So we already started on a few of those. There is I'm just going to swap this because I think it comes first, but there we go. So about the lines of Ganesha active, we have been talking about eliminating the Diva signaling for exports to start using watch URL. There is no bug for this yet. I need to file this, but this is something that we are going to start researching. Also, there is a bug that has been there for a while, which is fixing the export counter issue. Basically, on the CephFS NFS Ganesha driver, we don't reuse export IDs. We just keep pumping the number of ID that we are using, and if a share is released, then we are not going to use that export ID that we have available. And this is a problem, it has a limitation, and we have been researching on doing this. Another line, like I want to kind of group this work in different stories, Safe ADM deploy Ganesha, and for this we have Julio and Francesco who have been working quite a lot on this part for other services. We aim to leverage this and start having Ganesha have deployments in which we have Manila driver and Ganesha deployed by Safe ADM. There is some work that we are missing on the Ceph side, which is VIPs and HA for Ganesha, but we are going to start looking into this as a possibility, and I start using the Ceph NFS module that we have available already. I link it, the documentation of this new module, and whereas it's still on development, we can start looking into it and start first couple of deployments. I don't know, Romana, do you want to add something to that, or Francesco, Julio?
Hey, Victoria, hi. Can you hear me? Okay, so
Yes.
I just added the tracker for Ceph in the Ceph ADM deployed Ganesha section, because today we currently have this limitation, which is related to the binding IP address and the subnet used in the OSP use case. So I'm aware there is an effort on this topic. So this should be solved soon. And the other topic we should talk with the CephBU is mostly related to the Ganesha.conf, where we need to be consistent with the variables needed by Manila. So I guess these two are the main topics for Ganesha, for the Ceph ADM deployed Ganesha.
Nice. I'm looking at the tracker that was linked there.
Hey, guys, going back to the driver for just one question, but I noticed comment in the pod saying that DevStack is still deploying Octopus. So I'm not sure if there's a submission to enable Pacific in DevStack. I know we have master now, but is there something already to make it use Pacific?
So yeah, I think we should, for testing Pacific, we should only bump the version that we are using on as default on the script. And now that it's branched, this is going to be easier for us to do. I assume. I need to check out with Cinder. Well, Cinder is the only one that has a policy, actually a support policy, apart from us, and see if that is okay for them to just bump the version to Pacific and start defaulting to it directly.
Ah, okay. So you mean switching for all jobs, not adding support for it, but rather make it go Pacific by default, basically.
Yeah.
We have two options there, and we've kind of like hand waved a little bit in the past because because of the resource issues. So we called it out in our support policy, at least, that in the Manila side, we're only going to test against one release of Ceph with per commit testing, and we can in the future try to look at periodic jobs for maybe 2 different releases of Ceph or 3 different releases of Ceph that are currently running. The only issue there is visibility. So if whatever default version of Ceph that we choose to test is what we at that point assume is what people will deploy this code with, if that makes sense. So right now we assumed, it was going to be Octopus because Octopus was the release stable version. But now that Specific is out for the last month, I don't know, when people start adopting Wallaby, maybe Pacific's going to be the thing to use, or maybe people will stick on to Octopus. So we'll keep the defaults on Octopus, but run a periodic job on Pacific. That there is we have an option to do that. We also have an option because we run these jobs in multiple repositories. We can run different jobs in different repositories. Like we can run the Octopus job against Manila, the Pacific job against DevStack plugin Ceph, and the and maybe a Nautilus or something like that against Manila Tempest plugin and elsewhere that's there. And in the process, I think you have the same kind of questions even in the OOO side, right? But since you for integrated Ceph, you make a choice as to which version you're deploying. It's easier to support one thing, I think, over there. But what are the concerns similar, or do you have?
Yeah, for OOO, we were able to switch to Pacific like very last minute before the upstream branch was created. But all the testing happened with Octopus because Pacific wasn't released yet. Octopus and sometimes Master. Yeah.
So would it make sense to add an experimental job for Pacific more or less right now, and then consider whether we want to upgrade the development branch to Pacific sometime between now and when it releases?
Yeah, it's a good idea.
We would leave Octopus there for Wallaby because that's what we released and tested with and got backports to and so on, and told people they needed. We could still have, for that matter, we could make an experimental job for Octopus on development after we went to Pacific, or run it periodically if people think that's worth it. But
so was the thought that for DevStack plugin Ceph, now that we are branched, I did see a patch on testing Ceph Master. Was the thought that DevStack plugin Ceph will default to testing with Ceph Master, and the rest of us in elsewhere are going to run different branches? Or
the thought was that we'd have freedom to make that type of decision.
Okay,
now.
so there's no default choice.
I don't think we committed to it one way or the other yet.
Okay.
Yeah, the concern
I would like
Master,
actually to deploy with CephAtom eventually instead of the way plugin does it at the moment, because it'll be closer to what operators do, and we obviously can't do that on old branches now. So it gives us the branching gives us a lot of freedom to make decisions like that, but it doesn't force us to.
and that's another goal. Like right now, I think we reach some stability with the Ceph plugin, with the DevStack plugin Ceph, with regards to versioning and how stable it is. But maybe yes, a future goal now that it's branched would be to use a more close to operators tool such as CephIDM. In the past, there was a discussion of actually using Ceph Ansible instead of having this monolithic bash script. But yeah, definitely, like if we can do that in the future, like for an improvement on our CI, that would be awesome.
Yeah, Victoria's got it all stable, so I'm trying to figure out how to break it now.
To break it right now.
You know, I want to use a QEMU image to create a disk, a quote real disk instead of this loopback thing that we do, and so on. But we have freedom to do a bunch of those things now.
Yeah, but definitely,
and we can do them first in experimental jobs. You know.
Using Pacific is definitely something we want to do now that it's available, and also following the support cycle that the upstream Ceph community have, in which they basically have two versions. Like from the one they released it now is Pacific and Octopus, they are supported.
Yeah.
And the previous ones get not supported anymore. So we want to keep their cadence as well.
Agreed, and that is going to be the I don't know, the key point, I guess, over here. So we have two releases then that we probably need to support and test. So we just need to decide where to test those and support those. And we kind of like, you know, hand wave this, put it up on a doc somewhere saying we're going to test all releases in DevStack plugin Ceph, but on Manila we just want to test one release at a time, just because we have way too many test jobs and we don't want infra breaking on us because of that. So anyway, that's a great question, Julio. I think this discussion helps. We'll try to you know, make a proposal. I guess that would be the thing. We already do run the O job as an experimental job, except we have not invoked it in a while. It could even be broken running against the Manila job. So we have an option there to run Pacific against Manila drivers using O. That's another option without using DevStack plugin Ceph and all of that. Just have to say run experimental on any patch, and we can even, you know, automate that. Just, you know, keep running experimental of you know, periodically or something, or just put it up as a periodic job against Manila against a particular patch.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I think so. We could, in theory, we could move master. I'm thinking the plugin Ceph. We could move master to Pacific tomorrow, right? Like there's
Right.
no limitations there.
Yes.
And see if
Yeah.
we want to backport it or not.
Yeah, that part is completely open. I think the only concern there would be if something breaks, we should just, like, you know, be able to roll back or something, or find a solution that's beyond this team, because there's I mean, DevStack plugin Ceph is used all over the place.
That's correct.
Awesome.
You're encouraged
with
to submit a fix, Julio, by the way.
Yeah. Wouldn't call it fix rather, but yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Great. So I believe that this kind of sums up the future work as well, both let's call it the stories like Ganesha active and deploying well, using CephADM deploy Ganesha. Both are quite broad and definitely we expect to find complications, I would say, while we continue researching and testing this. So this is the goal for this cycle, to continue stabilizing what we have, what we implemented in Wallaby, and to start looking into these futures. As well, I hope that for the next PTG we can give an update on how, which is the, well, if we could actually deliver what we expected for this cycle, and well, some other ideas that we have as well, such as encryption, CephFS encryption. This is really early right now to discuss about that, but that's included on the other notes that I added below, apart from other enhancements that we also discussed. But just for now, I think it's well, better to kind of wrap it up in those ideas, unless somebody else has anything else to add. And well, just if there is any other question or concern, start discussing about those.
Oh, this is a great piece. So in your other notes, I see a lot of other features. We should probably spin that out into separate topics, because each one looks like a big piece of this thing. Right? Like, for example, you have the encrypted PVs stuff. You have the NFS cluster. I mean, DHS is true. You have Manila replication and stuff. I like that we're exploring all of these ideas, but maybe when we make progress, then we can do a community update or a discussion with the community just like this.
Definitely.
Awesome. All right. Any other comments, questions, concerns for Victoria? Right. If there are none, let's wrap up this topic. So we're running a little bit late, but like I said, we have some buffer room. And we're going to eat into that. So that's fine, I guess. So what we're going to do right now is switch some times out here. Let's take a 15-minute break because we've had an hour full of wonderful discussions. So let's take a 15-minute break and come back to talk about manilaclient and manila-ui and wrap up the PTG there. There are no further topics that I want to bring up. If anybody else has any immediate concerns, let me know. We'll try to see if we have some time to talk about that. If not, I mean, after these two topics, we're going to stop recording and get into a happy hour mode where I welcome everyone that's here to grab a drink, any libation of your choice. Doesn't have to be alcoholic. And join us. We're not going to be talking features, bugs, nothing. We're just going to be having fun at 1600 UTC in the same Zoom room. All right, for now though, let's take that 15-minute break and come back. Sounds fine?
Sounds good.
Sounds great. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
See you in 15 minutes.
Thanks.
Yes.
Awesome. All right, thanks for coming back. So here's the next topic we're talking about. The times have shifted a little bit, but we have Mari here, and we'll be talking to her about the OpenStackClient. And Mari, take it away when you're ready.
Thanks, Gautam. Hi, everyone. You can open the Etherpad, maybe. Yeah. Cool, thanks. So first, an update, what happened in Wallaby. We did get some patches in, although I was MIA half of the release. So I'm happy to see that something worked. So we got finished up the commands for snapshots, and we added share, adapt, abandon, which has the same functionality as Manila, manage, and manage. We added share, export locations, share, revert. We got in user messages. That's thanks to Dina. Thank you, Dina. That was super nice of you to help me out. And we got in share properties show. And this was also an effort from one of the Boston University students, Ashley. So that was cool that I got some help this cycle. Our task board is still the same as it was for a while now. All the tasks are organized by tags. I think Taiga changed their site, so you don't see the colors of the tags anymore, which is kind of upsetting for me. But anyways, if you open the task, you'll see still the tags for Wallaby, X release and Y release and wish list. And yeah, that's the board. Everyone is welcome to join. You can work on something. That would be very cool. I would appreciate it a lot. You can ask Gotham to add you to this board so you can assign yourself tasks. And you can ask me if you have any questions, how to get started, what to choose, anything at all. I'm happy to help. So for the Wallaby release, we were very ambitious with the plans. So we have some commands that we planned, but we couldn't deliver. So that would be share replicas, share services, storage pools, availability zones, and limits. Share replicas, I actually, I have them mostly done. If I fix my Gerrit account, I can continue. So availability zones and limits, these are two commands that should actually be implemented in the Python OpenStackClient repository, I believe. And I know that Gotham, you wrote a patch for availability zones for the SDK. I'm not sure if it's merged yet or not, but okay, cool. So it would be cool if we could write the client in the OpenStackClient repository, and we could use the SDK to implement these. There would be then subcommands. So the Manila would be an option for the general OpenStackClient command. So these two commands are a bit different in that sense. If anyone feels like it's very exciting, they want to work on it, do so. And then also we had, because last release I sat down with Victoria and we went through all the commands and we made kind of a plan. And we also already wrote up our plan for the Xena release, which would be the commands related to driver handlers, share service true, snapshot instances, network, share security services, share servers, and share instances. And I guess the goals are that since we haven't heard anything back from the community about our plans, I guess we can just continue as we were. If someone comes up and has a request for us to implement anything in priority, we can definitely do that. Just need to let us know. Otherwise, I think we're just gonna continue the plan that we have set out now. And I think most importantly, it would be great if someone would want to join me on this these tasks and grab commands. They're totally separate patches, so we're not stepping on each other's toes. These are good issues to work on to get started. You're implementing new commands, so it's kind of fun to work on it. And yeah, if we get more people, then we would be able to test and review each other's patches, and that will also make it move on much faster. So yeah, help me. Anyone who is slightly interested in working on this, come join me, and we can work on this together. And also, I think one of the main things is that we keep in track what the SDK efforts are and how these are going, and we should be trying to switch to using the SDK when possible. So yeah, I guess that's from me. Any questions, concerns?
I mean, first off, I have to say, I mean, this is amazing effort. Thank you so much, Mari, for continuing the momentum that we had in the past cycle and getting all of those things merged in Wallaby. She has a thing that says we couldn't deliver, but that was very ambitious for us to plan all of this, and most of all of this was Mari's work. So we're really glad to have you and you know, have you drive this and plan all of this for us. So a couple of important things that we might be able to help with as a community, because we've been working on the OSC integration for quite a few releases now. I think we got started back 3 releases ago, although the first code probably showed up 2 releases ago. So things are getting better. I mean, and we have a lot more hope right now, and we've gotten more comfortable writing the code. I mean, Mari's been doing an excellent job of that, as well as reviewing the code. A lot more people in the group actually know what OSC looks like now, because more commands are showing up, more patterns are showing up in the code base. And they can tell the differences between how we were doing things with manilaclient shell and how things are different with OpenStackClient. And like Mari said, the implementation is just in the shell layer. I mean, there's actually a common functionality that we currently rely on, which is the manilaclient SDK. So no matter which implementation you choose, they're calling in through the same SDK into the Manila API currently. And so there's parallel work going on in the OpenStack SDK land. And if you were there at the OpenStack SDK discussion, we didn't touch most of this, but the goal for that project is to provide a common, consistent SDK interface into all of the OpenStack services. And we got started with the OpenStack SDK work in the last cycle, and we're probably going to get a bunch of resources showing up in the next month or so, and there's a long way to go over there to catch up and be on par with the manilaclient SDK. Now, why do we have 2 different SDKs? Well, because the OpenStack SDK has got integration points into a lot of different places that we want to take advantage of, like the OpenStack Ansible collections project, as well as some of the other tooling that's going into the common things like Horizon, or maybe we can decide to use OpenStack SDK instead of the manilaclient SDK when we're standardizing cross-service interactions from Nova and so on. What happens to the manilaclient SDK? When we started this work, we had no plans of deprecating the manilaclient SDK, but that was what we were looking for. So if we were to get complete parity and have take advantage of all of these common features and design patterns that have evolved elsewhere, at some point it is going to be too much to maintain 2 different SDKs, 2 different clients. So we know the danger that we were looking at, but as we grow, now is the time to make those calls. So OpenStack SDK, we're not there yet. So we're going to continue to work on and improve the manilaclient SDK as we have done all these releases. And the manilaclient SDK is the one that the manila-ui uses. So we have a first-party customer right here in the community, and there are definitely other automation and tools that depend on that. But with the OSC, there are some portions that we have to tackle in the OpenStack SDK that we can't tackle in manilaclient SDK. And those are the portions that Mari was referring to with respect to availability zones, limits, and so on. So these are concepts that are across the cloud that are not specific to Manila. So Manila has AZs, Nova has AZs, Neutron has AZs, Cinder has AZs. So we should probably, when deployed together alongside all of these services, collate the AZs that are there from each of these services and present a common view. This is more beneficial to somebody that's using Manila alongside these other services than having it directly in the Manila client or in the Cinder client and so on. So that's the thought process around that. The same thing with limits. As a user, what can I do on an OpenStack cloud when all of these services are enabled? Can I get the limits from that are imposed on me from Manila, from Cinder, from Nova, from Neutron, and so on? So this is orthogonal to the thing of saying Manila is a standalone service. So this has nothing to do with that expectation. But when there are other services that are running, maybe people do want to have a common view, and it's not really a maybe. People have told us they want to have a common view, and which is why we're working in the OpenStack SDK to expose these things. this has nothing against the Manila standalone piece. Should you just want to run Manila in your cloud and no other OpenStack services, we're fine. Like you can use the integration that we have. We're going to have, I mean, even when we enable this in the OpenStack SDK, we're still going to allow you to just retrieve the Manila limits and just the Manila availability zones. That's the kind of design we're following. So there's no dependency we're establishing on the other services. But when you are running with all of these other services and you want to get like a collective picture, that's the piece that we're solving over there. So, so those are bigger challenges we're working with the OpenStack SDK team and the OpenStackClient team for. But like Maury said, this isn't going away anywhere. We're catching up on parity. So now we've got to start looking at what do we do with the Manila client piece. So including Wallaby was no different. When we had new API features show up in Manila, we only covered them in the Manila client shell. We didn't add them to the OSC, at least not every single API change. So this is the sort of thing we can stop doing from now. And for just this cycle, maybe we can look at, because the implementations are so similar, you're probably going to have to make a change in 2 different files. And it's not that big of a deal, as you can tell by looking at the OSC code, to add your extra options or your new API and get it supported in the OSC shell as well as the Manila client shell. So, and the reason I say as well as is because we can't chop off the Manila client shell and stop supporting it right away. Once we achieve parity, we are going to start deprecating the older client. And without all of these other resources showing up, it's going to be a funny place if we said that the older client is going to be, the Manila client is going to be deprecated. I mean, we've shared our intent with the whole community for that, that we eventually want to get rid of the Manila client shell. So if you're trying to use the current shell commands, eventually what's going to be preferred is the OpenStack share commands. And for the standalone piece, we said we'll figure out a way where you don't have to say OpenStack share and you can just say Manila, but it is still an OpenStack shell command. It's not really the Manila client shell command that's going to be executed at that point. So your entire workflows and designs, the way you interact with the shell will change. It will change for the better, I think, because the OpenStack client has some really cool patterns that we want to take advantage of, being part of the OpenStack shell that we currently don't have in Manila client, and we don't want to reinvent these in the Manila client shell. So you will see the development focus on Manila client shell is slowing. We're not adding any brand new features, supporting fancy things at the Manila client shell. And the reason is this. Ultimately, we want all our efforts focused on the OpenStack client shell, and we will make it easier for the standalone use case, but we will get rid of the Manila client shell in a release or 2. So that's, I guess, the point of discussion over here. Are we ready? We're not yet. We can see. Thanks for listing it out, Maury. What are the things that we need to get into the next release for us to make that call again? So maybe we can do a health check at the end of the Xena cycle and see what is missing, and then probably go add a deprecation warning in the Manila client shell at that point when we're ready. And is anybody opposed to that idea? What are your thoughts around that?
No, I don't oppose to that. I guess it's a great idea. And yes, of course, at some point we will need to just start making people implement features in both clients, because otherwise we would have like disparity every single time someone implements a new feature. So yeah, at some point we would need to do that. But I guess we can like give some notice before like our release starts and update our documentations, and then we could like ask people that are implementing a feature in the end of the release or when they are delivering those features, to have it completed as well. So
yeah. Agreed. And I firmly believe it's not that much work. Now, I mean, the level of familiarity we have gained with the client implementations, you're going to be doing the SDK part anyway. It's going to be modifying this other shell piece. And you know, you can seek out help from Mari, from me, from Victoria, from anyone else that's, you know, done this work. It's not that much effort to add it. Yes, it's going to be a pain that we've got to take for a release or two while we go through this deprecation cycle. And we knew that coming into this a couple of cycles ago. But I guess, you know, for me, the biggest thing is to drive this consistency is like, you know, helpful to our end users eventually. We're solving a bigger pain point, which, you know, end users were complaining about, that we had no integration with OpenStackClient. And, you know, and they were used to having all of those fancy patterns that they have as part of the OpenStackClient. I mean, an example from the last cycle, if we were to do system scoped users, right, RBAC implementations with Keystone, because Keystone does not have its own client anymore, or rather they've deprecated it. I mean, all of the work to do the cloud profiles and all of that is now in OpenStackClient. For the other clients to have that be to add that work is going to be, I mean, quite significant. So you can't as easily say, you know, Manila -OS cloud system and execute your commands at a system scope level. That's, I mean, it won't work right now, and we don't currently have plans to go add that functionality. So we expect, if you're using system scope commands, you're going to be better off using the OpenStackClient, and we acknowledge, you know, some of the Manila commands are not there yet, so there's a gap. So stuff like that's going to continue to show up. New features, new cross-project features are not going to end up in our individual project clients unless someone's got the will to drive that, which I think as a community we should, you know, not really spend our time on, because I mean, this effort is a lot by itself. All right.
So just one extra question about this topic. I know these the support from the different services within OpenStack on the OpenStack client has been before community goal. I don't know if this community goal was revisited. That's maybe a PTL question.
So was it a, well, I think people have been wanting for it to be a community goal, and there's been sufficient pushback from project teams to make it a community goal, because you know, there was way too much disparity between the native clients and the OpenStack clients. And as far as I know, I mean, I know at least Nova is doing all of the work. I know Manila is doing all of the work. And I know some other project teams are really working hard to get that parity and to deprecate their native clients. And you know, projects like Ironic have done what Ironic and Neutron have done exactly what we're looking for, which is have this take advantage of all of this OpenStack client framework, but still expose a standalone client. That it's completely different from the client that we have. I keep repeating that just so people get the message that it's not the same client, but we're trying to make it look like the same client should you want to run these services standalone. That was one of the biggest concerns about having a unified client. So that's going to go away, but in a different way go away, if that makes sense. And there are going to be some projects that are going to oppose this, and I think primarily the concerns were about code ownership and fixes and you know, how do we contribute to the design. And I think part of the problem there is the thing that their code exists in OpenStackClient, and that project has few hands working on it and reviewing it.
Well, yes, that makes sense. But know that like perhaps at the beginning there was this concern because obviously as you're saying, all the code was on the OpenStack client side. But since all the pluggable interface has become better and more flexible, I think it is worth having this discussion again with all these services, not only as a single, like as a Manila project, but also for all the other services within OpenStack.
Yeah, agreed. And that I didn't see much of that happening at the SDK CLI workshop this time, the PTG this time. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's time we do that, like revisit this as a community rather than individual projects. But the way it's trending, I don't see an issue with the way we're planning to do things. This jives with the rest of the projects in the community. It's just that there are going to be one or two that will take more and longer, and that's probably going to be a broken user experience for a little bit.
Totally, yeah.
Awesome. All right. Any other questions, concerns for Maury? I want to chat with Maury at least to try and get do some innovative things for this upcoming cycle. But we'll try and plan that together and make a proposal in a future meeting. Apart from that, thanks, Maury. Thanks for putting this together and for giving us an update of what's going on.
Sure. Thanks, Gautam.
Awesome. All right. And so we have just 5 minutes, and before I say we'd stop and go into the happy hour, but if folks would like to wedge in this other topic, which again is exciting, let's try and get that done. We might bleed into the happy hour a little bit. I apologize for that. But before that, can we take a team picture? If you all can turn on your cameras, I can pause recording at this point. If necessary, let me do that. Recording, and let's get into the next point, which is manila-ui plans and update. Dina, Victoria, the floor is yours.
All right, so I will give the floor to Dina, who is here, even though it's quite late where she is. Thank you, Dina. Do you want to go ahead?
Yes. So the most, I'll try to keep it short. The most important thing that happened in the last release was that the share resize feature was added to manila-ui, and then security service field, there is an update to version 2.44. Now OU field, the organizational unit field, is now available in manila-ui. And there was also other features added, but the main work is updating the manila-ui micro version. So the future plan is also to try to get it in line with main Manila, which is now stands at 2.63. That's basically what was, in short, was happening. And also everybody, I invite everybody to also contribute to manila-ui. There is now manila-ui stands at micro version 2.44. I have 2.45 in progress, and I've seen contributions from Hafilat and Hayektin for 2.46. So, and it's still too far, and I'm offering my help, and if anybody needs help with manila-ui, you can ask me and I'll help if I can. And that's basically it. And future work plan is also to continue updating manila-ui. And Victoria, it's outreach internship and the policies update. If you can talk about those.
Sure thing. Thank you very much, Dina. Just to expand a bit on the microversion, which is a topic that, as Dina mentioned, is quite important. That has been our focus last cycle, and I think the previous one as well. As Dina mentioned, we are kind of away from the latest microversion, as Dina mentioned, which is 2.63, that is Wallaby. And from where we are standing to Wallaby, we have several small changes and others that are not so small that actually are features. So keeping the focus on bumping those microversion and delivering those features on the UI is part of the plan that we have for the Xena release. Dina has made an amazing work by looking at each of the microversions that she worked on this cycle and adding the missing features that we had for each of those. Right now we are in 2.44, and well, we keep working on that. Apart from that, there were several enhancements in usability that Dina has been working on. Now the UI is a bit more relatable on what is happening in Manila itself. It's easier to understand what's going on. The behaviors that you expect that happen are actually more correct. So that's another thing that's worth mentioning, even though that it's listed there as a bug fix, it's actually a great improvement. And for future work, as Tina was mentioning, we have, well, one of the overreaching internship tasks we have is to work on the shared tape quotas visual component. This is a feature we have in Manila that we don't have on the UI yet. And it's, well, a future work that we expect to have an intern working on. And well, continue with the microversion updates. As we mentioned, it's quite crucial for what we are doing on the UI. That's pretty much it for the UI updates. Any comment or question?
Nope, lots of bouquets and compliments. This is really cool work. I think a lot happened in this cycle. Great job, Dina, in onboarding that quickly and finding all the bugs and starting with fixing them, as well as putting together a plan for us and how that project can continue to this thing. I'm very happy that you're continuing to work on that. I hope we can keep you around in the community. And I mean, this is a call out, I guess, if anybody is looking for a software engineer extraordinaire, Dina is ready for, is available for hire. So make your offers. I know we at Red Hat would love to this thing, and I'm sure we're reaching out, but this is the upstream community. I can't have favorites.
Thank you, Gautam. And thank you, Victoria.
Thanks, Xena. Kudos again for your amazing work on the UI.
Yeah, I'll second that. I think I wrote one microversion update. It's not easy. You working on the UI, it's not easy for everyone. And like I saw you like starting the internship and just like doing everything so fast. It's just, I'm amazed. You did a great job.
Thank you, Maria. It
Awesome.
was actually interesting. And I'll try to continue it, so, and hopefully we can get it in line that it has all the useful features that Manila has. It's available in Manila UI as well.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, everyone. So this brings us to the end of the technical discussions here at the PTG. Thank you so much for participating. It's been 4 awesome sessions that we broke this down into, and there was a lot that we spoke about. I spoke a lot, so I apologize if I kept like repeating myself or something. But I'm very glad that all of you were able to join, despite all the stuff that's going on in the world around us. So this is the biggest reason this community stays this energetic, because of all of this kind of participation. So thanks for joining. I'm going to kill the recording right now and stop sharing my screen. If this will let me cut the recording.